What's up, guys? Rick from DFS On Demand here with a preview for Week 8 of the NFL season. So basically, halfway through the NFL year. I cannot even believe it. Let's hop right into this week. So if you're new to the series, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go position by position, talk about some of the more interesting plays on the slate. This is the Thursday to Monday slate, so I think I have every game in here. And then we're going to run through some of the tools that I use, which I've created myself, and they're available on dfsondemand.com. Okay, let's start with the quarterback position. Pretty interesting this week. I think there's a couple of clear-cut options at the top, and then a few guys down the list a little bit that I'm pretty interested in. So I'm actually going to jump right over to my cheat sheet here, and we're going to look for quarterbacks. And we're going to sort it by projections. Again, you guys seem to be pretty happy with these projections as opposed to player scores. In the process of grading these projections to see how accurate they've been, so keep an eye out for that in upcoming weeks. Pretty volatile with the NFL, so all projection systems probably are not super accurate compared to something like NBA, but I will score these for you. Okay, so right off the bat, Dak Prescott. What's not to like about Dak right now? 3 straight games of 3 passing touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns over the course of the last 4 weeks. The fact that he can do it with both his arms and his legs clearly makes him a pretty significant fantasy player. Faces a Washington defense that now, coming off the Monday night loss, is going to have a short week, and they just allowed Carson Wentz to throw 4 touchdowns against them. So I imagine it's going to be a tall task for Washington to stop Dak Prescott, who's probably in the midst of, maybe not probably, he is in the midst of the greatest stretch of his young career so far, at least from a fantasy perspective. He is my highest projected highest projected quarterback on the slate. Speaking of Carson Wentz, who just shredded Washington, let's look up Carson Wentz. He's right here, 3rd most expensive quarterback. He's thrown for 11 touchdowns over the course of the last 3 weeks, and he scored at least 31 DraftKings points in 2 of those games. Continues to be effective with his legs, you can see here. So it might not always be in terms of fantasy points where he's going to rack you up, 40 or 50 rushing yards every single night, but he moves the chains, which keeps a lot of drives alive and allows him to continue to throw the ball, continue to stay on the field. So very handy runner, which allows his offense to score a lot of points. The Eagles obviously, 6-1 at this point, having a great stretch, and this San Francisco defense just not good. They have faced the other 2 NFC East division quarterbacks in the last 2 weeks, so they've faced Kirk Cousins and Dak Prescott, have allowed a combined 60 DraftKings points. So San Francisco in big trouble if we get any shade of Carson Wentz that we have seen over the course of the last month. Couple other options here. Those 2 are the obvious ones. Those 2 are going to be very popular. I'm looking at a couple others here. Russell Wilson at home against Houston. So even with J.J. Watt on the field, this Houston defense had struggled against opposing quarterbacks. Now he's out for the year. They have to face Russell Wilson, who's firing on all cylinders right now. He has scored at least 29 DraftKings points in 3 of the last 4 games. You can see it's a ton of pass attempts. It's a ton of yards. He can also do it on the ground. So I think it's going to be really tough for Houston to challenge Russell Wilson. And I want to show you something here. This is a comparative tool that I have that I like to throw in a couple players. And let's just do Dak and Carson. Whoops. Got to select them both. And Russell. So now we've got these 3 quarterbacks here, and I'm hoping you can see this. Maybe it's a little bit better. Russell Wilson is in purple, Dak Prescott is that black color, and Carson Wentz is the green. So you can see Russell Wilson, outside of what was this week? That was probably what, week 6, week 5 maybe, whatever October 8th was, has been in the same place as these guys like Dak Prescott and Carson Wentz. So outscored them on the 24th, outscored them on the 1st, failed here on October 18th, and then last week all three were basically in the same spot. So you're getting Russell Wilson, who at least over the course of the last 4 weeks has been just as good as Carson Wentz and Dak Prescott, and he's, what, $1,000 cheaper? And probably, what, 15% less owned? I don't know what the ownerships are going to be, but I thought that was worth looking at there. And then I don't mind Derek Carr at all here, okay? We kind of talked about this last week where first game back from the injury, we didn't really know what to expect. We talked about the Michael Crabtree in particular and the Oakland wide receivers last week, just because we thought, just because we thought Derek Carr was going to be able to shake off the rust. In his second game back, he did it to the tune of 417 yards, 3 touchdowns, including the game winner with no time left on the clock. So obviously a pretty good game to come off of. Now, this matchup against Buffalo, I think it's a little deceiving. I think it looks worse than it actually might be. So here's the versus defense tool. And we'll just do quarterbacks against Buffalo. And they're basically a middle-of-the-road defense against opposing quarterbacks in terms of DraftKings points. But, I mean, you can see the first 4 weeks of the year, or the first 3 weeks of the year, they didn't face anybody. McCown, Cam Newton, and Trevor Siemian. Then they got Matt Ryan, who's having a disappointing season. And then here's where it starts to even get a little bit concerning for Buffalo. Andy Dalton scores 18 DraftKings points on you. And then Jameis Winston comes out and scores 28 DraftKings points over the course of their last 2 games. So now you get Derek Carr, who's coming off 400-plus yards, and Buffalo, hemorrhaging points to opposing quarterbacks at a rate that they haven't yet this year is a pretty good combination for me. All right, running backs. So, we'll go to the cheat sheet here, and I don't know how clear I can be. It's week 8. Assume that I love Le'Veon Bell until I tell you otherwise. Oh, actually, sorry. Let me jump back real quick. Very quickly, if you're desperate at quarterback, consider Brian Hoyer, okay? I'll do this very quickly, sorry. Here's his game logs. It is feast or famine. He is not consistent, but he has shown in 2 out of the last 4 weeks significant upside. It's no surprise that those games are coming when he has the ability to throw the ball a lot. Brian Hoyer is going to get that opportunity to throw the ball early and often against the Philadelphia team. So just so you can see what's his price, $4,800, the near min, against a pretty good matchup against Philadelphia's secondary where he's going to have to throw the ball a lot. So that's if you're desperate. Okay, sorry about that. Assume I love Le'Veon Bell until I tell you otherwise. Okay, highest projected running back. Let me just show you something very quickly here. 202 touches, okay? 202 touches is 52 touches more than the next closest running back. That is the same distance or the same number of touches that separates the next 16 running backs, okay? Le'Veon Bell is head and shoulders above the league in terms of usage. Assume I love him until I come on here and tell you otherwise. Now, here's someone pretty interesting. And we've had a lot of good discussion around Kareem Hunt this year. The first couple weeks of the year, or maybe the 3rd and 4th week, I was kind of off of him a little bit. I came on here and said that his touchdown runs were unsustainable. I said that he was breaking off 70-yarders all the time, and that's something we couldn't bank on week in and week out. And some of you blasted me in the comments, rightfully so. I was happy to hear some of those comments. This is the kind of situation I want to buy back in on Kareem Hunt. Okay, so his price was inflated before. We talked about that. Back down now to $7,500, and I'm in. Okay, so he has not scored a touchdown in, the last 4 weeks. And he's still scored 15 to 20 DraftKings points every single game. He is essentially a lock for 100 all-purpose yards. Catches the ball. Does a lot of things in this offense. He's still the workhorse. So his what am I trying to say here? His price is normalized a bit. His production is normalized a bit, right? So he stopped scoring touchdowns because he was doing that at an unsustainable rate, and his price comes down. Well, now it's a little unsustainable. He's going to score touchdowns again at some point. He's just been on a little bit of a cold run, but touchdowns are volatile. Like, there's a lot of luck involved. So I'm not worried about it. I love paying a price that's, $2,000 cheaper than 3 or 4 weeks ago for a guy who's going to get the same amount of usage, has just as much upside as being the number one running back as he did a month ago. And this Denver defense, it doesn't look good on paper, so I imagine we're going to get a pretty good ownership on Kareem Hunt. And, 3 or 4 weeks ago, we would have said Kareem Hunt is absolutely matchup proof. So I'm willing to invest here on Hunt. Okay, where do I want to go next here? Mark Ingram. Take a quick peek at Mark Ingram. Since the Saints traded Adrian Peterson, Mark Ingram racks up 22 carries, 25 carries, 104 and 114 yards. Finds the end zone 3 times. Very clearly the workhorse now. Seems that he's going to be getting 20-plus touches every single week. So he's trending in the right direction. Matchup here with Chicago should be just fine. I think the usage is too good to pass up here for Mark Ingram. Carlos Hyde is another interesting guy. So there was a lot of discussion over the course of the last few weeks. Let's see what's going on here. Let's do the San Francisco running backs and just look at some game logs. So maybe 3 weeks ago, there was talk that Matt Breida was going to take over Carlos Hyde's job. It was week 5 where Carlos Hyde saw 8 carries. Breida saw, 10. Since then, Hyde hasn't seen a ton of work, but he's dominated the touches out of the backfield. So I don't think there's a concern about Breida really taking opportunity away here. Sorry, Houston just tied the game. So if you're watching the World Series, I don't think there's a concern with Breida anymore. I think Hyde is going to see 13 to 16 touches every single week, or carries, I should say, because he did see 8 targets last week and 6 the week before that. I think the concern here is that San Francisco might be down so much that they're not going to be able to feed the ball to Carlos Hyde. But kind of with what I just mentioned, 14 targets and 9 receptions over the last 2 weeks kind of keeps his value, his floor at a decent spot for me. So for $6,000 at a position that doesn't particularly have a ton of value, I thought Carlos Hyde was worth a little peek here. And then if you're really looking for value, here's Tarik Cohen. He's a guy we've talked about a bit. He's the passing down back, right? He's not going to get a ton of rushes out of the backfield, but he is going to be involved in the pass game. And I know that Mitchell Trubisky only threw the ball 7 times last week, but they're not going to be able to get away with that against New Orleans. He's going to have to drop back and he's going to have to throw it. And if that happens, I think Cohen's value rises because he's the guy who's going to be on the field there. And he's electric, right? Like, he can snap off and, needs one catch to take it to the house. I think he's a nice little punt play. I wouldn't feel too super confident about it just because of the amount of times he might actually touch the ball, but he's only $4,600. So you could do much worse in this price range for a guy who, the Bears like to move around, and he's done some interesting things over the course of the last couple weeks. All right, wideouts. Let's start with Dez Bryant. Where is Dez? Right here. Dez is interesting, right? I'm like a little intrigued by Dez. This Cowboys offense, I kind of, I talked about Dak. Like, I kind of love this Cowboys offense this week against Washington, who had to play on Monday night. Dez trending in the right direction, 31 targets over the course of the last 3 weeks. He's caught touchdowns in 3 of 4. Should continue to thrive in this matchup. $7,700. I don't think it's unrealistic for him to finish the week. Maybe, I think his upside's probably wide receiver 2? Sure, I guess he could be wide receiver 1, but wide receiver 2 might be a little bit more realistic. So I like Dez Bryant there. And then speaking of targets, let me show you something here. We're going to go back to my cheat sheet, and we're going to go wide receivers, and we're going to sort this by targets. Here's Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry's second in the league in targets. He is $2,300 cheaper than Antonio Brown, who is the leader. Obviously, fantasy points don't come just from targets, but I want you to see what I'm looking at here, right? Like, $2,300 discount to get the guy who is the second leader in targets is going to be a pretty good investment for me. And let's talk through this scenario a little bit more. Here's Jarvis Landry, $6,500, and target monster. So I know what you're saying, right, Rick? It's not Jay Cutler this week. That's who Landry racked up all these targets against. It's Matt Moore. I know. I got it. I got some stats for you. So with Matt Moore under center last week, Jarvis Landry still heavily involved in the offense. He caught 5 of his 8 targets. And then going back to last year, this is what I like as well. 3 starts for Matt Moore last year. Jarvis Landry goes 15 of 22, so 15 catches on 22 targets, 213 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So Matt Moore certainly not shy to throw the ball to Jarvis Landry. $6,500 is a really good price for a guy who is very likely to be a focal point in that offense. And then Devin Funchess popped up on my projections. If you saw that, $5,900. A little bit of noise there because it's probably just the matchup with Tampa Bay that is so elite and ideal for the Carolina wide receivers. But Funchess has seen at least 8 targets in each of the last, I think it's 5 weeks. Yeah, each of the last 5 weeks. So, I mean, the looks are there. Whether Cam can hit him or not is another story, but Tampa Bay is like probably the best matchup you can get. So, I have to tell you that Funchess popped up on my projections this week. If you're really desperate, if you're really down here, there's a couple Jets wide receivers, believe it or not. Robbie Anderson is probably the guy I'm most interested in. Finally found the end zone last week. So it was week 6 where he saw 12 targets, only converted on 4. But finally found the end zone last week. So two games of double-digit DraftKings points in the last 2 weeks. You're only really looking for like 3 or 4 times value from this guy. Josh McCown has at least proven to be adequate and serviceable at the quarterback position for the Jets this season. And then finally, tight ends. We talk about the top 3 every single week. I think it's worth noting that Austin Seferian-Jenkins, another one of those New York Jets pass catchers, only $4,900 with 3 straight games with touchdowns. And remember the touchdown that he had overturned. He should probably have 4 touchdowns in this span. Legit red zone target for Josh McCown. 24 targets over the last 3 weeks, and he's that first guy priced out of that elite range. So I think he's going to be popular because of this pricing structure here, but not terribly. He's not going to kill you. $4,900. That's a pretty good price. Hunter Henry. Okay, this is the type of situation where I look to buy. So Hunter Henry has scored 13, 14, and 11 DraftKings points, and he only scored a touchdown in one of those weeks. So guys who are able to score without finding the end zone are always going to be important to me. They're going to be appealing to me because they're not dependent on that touchdown. And a lot of tight ends are dependent on touchdowns, especially under $5,000. Hunter Henry is probably not. So I think that's what's exciting because he does then have upside because if he catches a touchdown or 2, he can really go nuts. And he gets a pretty good matchup here with New England when you, again, assume that Phillip Rivers is going to have to drop back early and often against New England. And then we'll wrap it up with Jason Witten here at $4,200. It's been kind of feast or famine for Witten this year. He started off pretty hot, 18, 25 DraftKings points, then combined for less than 4. And then he's kind of gotten back on track lately. So good to see that Witten is still alive, first of all. But 2 straight weeks with putting up respectable scores. He caught a touchdown last week. Again, this Washington defense, I'm not impressed. They give up, is it the most? Oh, no, they're like a bottom 8 team against tight ends. So, expect Witten to continue to move the chains, continue to be a red zone threat, have a good opportunity to reach value this week. there you go. Week 8 of the NFL season. Looking forward to it. Give me a shout on Twitter. It's at DFS On Demand, or leave a comment below. Let me know who you guys are playing and who you're excited about. Talk to you soon. See ya.